Before we start with the main presentation, I'd just like to quickly remind you that you can share your feedback and engage with the Hays Salary Guide conversation on social media. Simply follow us on Twitter @Hays News or connect with us on Facebook or LinkedIn using the hashtag Hays Salary Guide. Welcome to our webinar and thank you for joining today. I'm Jane Donnelly and I'm delighted to welcome you to the launch of our latest Salary Guide. By way of a brief introduction, I've worked at Hays for 24 years and I'm the Managing Director for the East of England region. I'm joined today by Jordan Cummings, who is an Associate Director from the CBI. Jordan will be first talking you through the business challenges that the CBI see that we're facing in the next coming year. I will then take you through the findings of our 2018 Salary and Recruiting Trends Guide. Just a reminder, you can type questions at any time during the webinar and we'll spend a few minutes at the end going over these. I will now pass you over to Jordan.
Thank you very much, Jane, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for dialing in, and thank you, Hays, for having me. As Jane mentioned, my name's Jordan. I'm the Assistant Director in London, and I lead our London policy work, which involves engagement with the Mayor's team and the Deputy Mayor's team on capital policy. Now, the CBI are delighted to be supporting the Salary Guide again. We've been supporting for a number of years now, and we really value the insight that comes out of the guide every year. It really assists our education and skills team and gets under the skin of some of the underlying trends in the labour market. So again, we are delighted to support. Now, for those in the room, in many rooms across this webinar who are unaware of what we do, the CBI are the largest business organisation in the country. We speak for around 190,000 firms of all shapes, all sizes and all sectors. And we communicate their concerns to policymakers from civil service level all the way up to the Cabinet. We partner with our members quite often to help solve the pressing policy issues of the day, and we often see ourselves as a convener in various sectors to allow firms to share best practice among one another. Our aim is relatively simple as a business. We create an environment in which businesses can succeed, create jobs and drive economic growth and shared prosperity. Now, firms up and down the country undoubtedly face challenges in the months ahead, with the direction of government policy becoming crucial to the UK's long-term business environment and even societal makeup. So this afternoon, I'd like to talk through some of these challenges, including the continued uncertainty around the Brexit negotiations, the UK's post-Brexit immigration system, and the impact of housing shortages on the UK workforce, the latter of which is becoming significantly more talked about and acute in certain areas of the country, in London where I am, and I know in the East of England as well. But not all doom and gloom. I would also quite like to touch on two areas of opportunity for business, and those are kind of the skills and retraining agenda and the opportunities and possibilities which lie behind innovation and technological adoption across the economy. So, when talking about the business environment, I'm sure you will all agree it's quite difficult to discuss that without mentioning the B word, so I thought I would touch upon Brexit first. We've undoubtedly now reached a critical stage of the negotiations, with every passing week potentially moving us closer to a withdrawal agreement and a draft political declaration which can be agreed on both sides, both here and on the continent. Now, as you'll see from the arrows that I've outlined here, the CBI is continuing to work with government and our members up and down the country to avoid a no-deal scenario in March 2019, a kind of cliff edge scenario, which will secure a crucial transition period. Secondly, we are working to develop a business-friendly future economic relationship with the European Union, our largest trading partner. And we're urging government to invest sufficient resource and time into the UK's domestic agenda. Now, the latter is essential, ensuring the UK economy remains match fit as and when we look to develop trading relationships on Brexit day one, if you will. Now, all of this is incredibly important because the CBI's latest survey, which was taken around 4 or 5 weeks ago, showed that now around 80% of businesses, or over 80% of businesses, are citing Brexit as having negative impacts on their investment decisions. Now that figure is stark, but it's even more stark when you consider that 12 months ago it was at around 40%. So we're looking at a doubling of that within a year. Further still, 60% of our respondents have cited that Brexit is now having a material impact on the attractiveness of the UK overall as a destination in which to invest. So this is becoming really acute now, and with every passing week, those kind of investment decisions and those pots of money for investment across the UK, not just in the south, are kind of being put on hold. Now, the deal presented by the Prime Minister is a compromise, we know that, including for businesses. But importantly, if it's passed, it unlocks that transition period that I mentioned, which is essential for safeguarding jobs and investment across the United Kingdom. Now, political turmoil can probably be expected in the wake of a meaningful vote by Parliament, and the Commons arithmetic kind of comes into play for the government here, and there are a lot of stakeholders politically for the Prime Minister to weigh up. But the CBI, as we've always said, stands objectively ready to assess the future economic relationship and will continue to work in the interests of its members up and down the UK to communicate these issues to government and the impact of not taking action quickly. I think despite this continued uncertainty, the patience showed by the business community, however, remains pretty clear. Firms are ready to help government make a success of the UK's future economic relationship, both with the EU and the wider world. Though, as I said before, we are here to urge policymakers to understand that this patience is already threadbare and that the appetite for stability cannot be underestimated. So, as many of you will also agree, businesses' greatest assets, however, are often the people that comprise them. Given this, the need to attract talent and retain talent of all skill levels from the UK and overseas is critical to businesses of all sectors and sizes. Now, the CBI feel that the government's current proposals for a post-Brexit immigration system do pose serious questions for firms throughout the UK. Therefore, we're urging the government to better understand the needs of the business community when it comes to accessing talent. Firstly, this includes lowering the current salary threshold stipulated from £30,000 and ensuring a specific route for low-skilled migration exists below that. Secondly, given the inaccessibility of the non-EU immigration system for small and medium-sized firms, attempts really need to be made to simplify the notification requirements and sponsorship processes for firms under any new system. And finally, we're urging government to ensure that any reforms that they put in place are ready to go live on day one. We know, we've heard it from businesses up and down the country, that they need 2 years to adapt to any new regime for migration. And because of that, we need the system to be live on day one. So we'll continue to work with the Home Office, we'll continue to work with BEIS and wider departments to highlight the impacts of failing to ensure that these things are in place. Getting this right is essential, especially when we consider that industries such as hospitality, care and construction are already facing acute skills shortages across the economy, and the risk of exacerbating these shortages undoubtedly has knock-on effects for the wider economy. I know, for instance, in the east of England, the availability of skills, especially in hospitality, food production and agriculture, has really risen up the agenda in recent months. So I'd be quite interested to hear from you in the Q&A, perhaps at the end, about how your firms or your clients' firms are adapting to the current state of play in the region when it comes to the migration system and shortages of labour. Moving slightly closer to home, I'd like to touch upon housing policy. Now, housing policy in the UK has received some additional attention in recent months, with the government making key announcements on relaxing borrowing caps for local authorities and some social housing reform measures. These are welcomed, but action remains when it comes to the factors underpinning some of these housing shortages, from skills and a mix of tenures to the development of modern modes of construction across the economy, and some market flexibility around who actually builds these homes. Now, in 2016, the CBI's report, No Place Like Home, first brought our members' views to the fore on a need for a mixture of tenures. This year, we're going to be looking at a focus project on the financial sustainability of the construction industry. This is an issue that's underpinning some of these challenges facing the key industry players and is made more stark by the fact that in 2017, the top 10 contractors in the UK made a pre-tax profit of -1% almost. So it shows you the degree of severity in the sector. Now, building on that work, early next year, we're going to look at publishing fresh analysis on the regional action needed to ease some of these housing pressures faced across the UK. We're doing this because we understand that each region faces individual challenges in both availability of homes and infrastructure links, and that devolution or the composition of in-region developers can make national policies, standards and delivery targets quite hard to reach. Therefore, the CBI are going to be using that convening power that I spoke about earlier to work more intensively at local level with policymakers and metro mayors, devolved bodies and LEPs to clarify some of the local priorities for housing delivery and how those get delivered. It's fair to say that we welcome the Chancellor's recent commitment, £500 million to boost the Housing Infrastructure Investment Fund, though for us, a more substantive action could have been taken on measures to enable authorities to bring forward schemes offering a diversity of tenures, which are tailored to meeting local demand. But without doubt, as we seek to ensure that the UK economy is match fit, as I referenced earlier, substantive action on provision of all tenures and flexibility on the routes to achieving the government's home building targets will be fundamental. Now, I said it wouldn't all be doom and gloom, so the two opportunities I want to talk about are skills and retraining and innovation and technological adoption. Despite the challenges, businesses in the UK do face real opportunities in harnessing knowledge and innovation to drive productivity. The UK's long-standing productivity challenge can be tackled, in part by the adoption and implementation of base-level technologies and systems. These include CRM systems, accounting and HR software. Now, our research shows that investment in these base-level technologies often allow firms to take advantage of more developed innovations, for example, blockchain and AI, when they become more mainstream to the wider economy. Because of that, we're working with members across all sectors to explore the opportunities for digital transformation within business. Building on our recent report, Become More Magpie, and I can tell everyone why it was called that in the Q&A if you'd like, our focus will turn to the FTSE 350 first and consequently the wider business community, looking at insight and best practice, notably perhaps within those traditional industries at risk of rapid technological adaptation and existing headwinds, to look at how some of these technologies can be diffused more effectively. Now, again, we welcome the Chancellor's recent commitment of £150 million to fund fellowships and attract scientific talent from across the globe, as well as the ongoing commitments to the development of a modern industrial strategy. Importantly now, however, it's incumbent on BEIS and the wider departments to make sure that both sector and place deals maintain momentum and are developed really truly in partnership with the business community. The CBI has stood from the start as a partner on the industrial strategy, and we're ready, just as Brexit, to work with businesses to try and make it a success for the future. Now, if we get this right on technological adoption, we can utilise the UK's world-class research base and talent pool to diffuse technology more effectively across the economy, and it could potentially unlock £100 billion of untapped revenue. So again, in the Q&A, I'd be delighted to hear about how your firms are perhaps digitising existing processes or work, and how it's making you more effective, or the challenges you might face with doing so, because we know there are also barriers. Now, many of these policy challenges facing firms today do also come against a backdrop of skills gaps or shortages, some of which I'm sure Jane will pick up after me. However, therein lies a real opportunity for the UK in some ways, in the manner in which we respond to those challenges. Alongside the apprenticeship levy, which the CBI continues to work with government to reform, the Chancellor announced in the 2017 budget the creation of a national retraining partnership. Now, the CBI had long called for a partnership of this kind, forging links between government, business and the Trade Union Congress. As such, we were delighted to see the government's continued commitment to the National Retraining Partnership with a £100 million commitment to fund the scheme ahead of this year's budget, which we called for. This adult learning and training service will allow employees facing the prospect of digital automation in their industry an opportunity to retrain and seek rewarding and productive alternative roles. We feel that this service, if well delivered, could provide employees of the future real opportunity and ownership in their careers, and I think for myself provides a human balance between technological evolution, which we know the economy needs, and job protection, which we know individuals need. Again, I would be delighted to hear from you all today around how this partnership might relate to your firms and the roles in your firms, and whether or not there are questions that the CBI's team can help you answer on how this scheme will be rolled out, the pots of money available and how they can be implemented in yours or your clients' workforces. So please do ask questions on that. Now, all of this comes against an economic backdrop. So I'd like to turn briefly to the economy. This year, we are expecting slow but steady momentum in the UK economy with growth of around 1.4%. Moving into next year, we expect this rate to fall to around 1.3%, which is certainly underwhelming for a developed Western economy like the UK, and it trails comparative levels of global growth as well. Now, similar to last year, we expect less support from domestic demand and business investment, which at the moment is around flat, the latter of which was helped in part by the Chancellor's approach to the budget a few weeks ago. Though, as we will see in a moment, more remains to be done to help spur that business confidence and investment. Now, as well as this, household spending does remain relatively dampened, as we aren't seeing the high levels of employment from what government calls the jobs miracle feeding through to real wage growth. We will all have felt the rise in inflation from last year, with much of this reflecting the feed-through of a suppressed sterling. That being said, there are some signs of early stabilisation in this. All of this has consequently caused the cost of imports to rise. Conversely, net trade provides the economy with a bit of additional support as that suppressed sterling feeds through to exports. But it must be said that global trade does now come against a backdrop of protectionism following the mutual imposition of goods tariffs between the US and China. And finally, the uncertainty around Brexit remains a major constraint on investment plans. This is notable for those larger projects in which returns are realised over many years and have heavy sunk costs. Again, just a reference, our survey shows that 80 to 90% of firms now citing Brexit as negatively affecting investment plans, doubling in a year. We expect these figures to remain stark. I'd be interested to know how it feels on the ground from your firms and from your clients, and how customers might be responding to you on spending, and whether or not they're referencing this kind of squeeze on living standards in some areas. Now, I've loosely mentioned the budget a few times, so I'd like to touch on it at the end here. The Chancellor faced some tough choices on public expenditure this year, with clear calls to focus on provisions which boost business investment and productivity. Now, this came against the need for fiscal preparedness for Brexit and the commitment of £20 billion in additional funding for the NHS, which was made earlier in the year. Now, as you'll see from the slide here, the Chancellor did act upon many of the CBI's calls to deliver some respite for firms, and he raised the annual investment allowance, reformed the apprenticeship levy to some degree, delayed the implementations of IR35 in the private sector, reformed structural buildings allowances, and piloted a scheme of fibre broadband. These are all great things, but the Chancellor could have taken more action on setting a wider business rates reform regime, set a more clear vision for energy efficiency and the future of carbon pricing across the economy, and really consider the impacts of taking unilateral action as the UK on a digital services tax. Working with the OECD on the latter and other economies is essential to ensure that the UK's international competitive advantage is retained. Unilateral action can sometimes be quite dangerous to take. Given all this, however, the CBI is clear that the dark clouds of Brexit uncertainty do loom, but the business community can help government build upon our existing assets, of which there are many. This includes the power of brand Britain, which is very strong across the globe, and we can utilise our record levels of employment. Now, those record levels of employment are a joint achievement of both government and business. So I've cantered through quite quickly, quite a lot there. I'm delighted that you've all dialed in to listen, and I do hope that you have Q&A on any of this, even if it's on Brexit. I know that Jane is now probably going to run through in a bit more detail the regional labour market picture. So I'm going to hand over to Jane.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jordan. That was really interesting. So I'm going to go straight into our salary guide here. So this is the 5th year we've produced our UK guide. It covers 12 specialist, skilled and technical areas, supported by regional salary data. It's based on salary information provided by 1,800 recruitment experts from our 93 UK offices. As well as using our own extensive insight to inform the guide, we also launched a survey designed to ascertain employee satisfaction, employees' concerns, and gather general insights into the market. And we secured over 23,000 responses from employers and employees. So to start, let's just set the scene, and I'll quickly recap last year's findings. So in 2017, 59% of organisations expected their business activity to increase, and 71% said they were planning to recruit. There was a 1.8% average salary increase, and 55% of employees were considering moving jobs in the coming 12 months. So this year, against a backdrop of continued economic and political uncertainty, hiring plans are the highest since our survey began 5 years ago, which is quite outstanding. And this hiring plans, as Jordan has just been talking about, are very much under threat by the skills shortages and an increasingly competitive labour market. So let's take a look at what our survey results showed in more detail. So let's start with the positives. Now, there's obviously ongoing uncertainty in terms of employers' business outlook. However, this outlook does remain robust, and employers are optimistic about the market and their businesses. There's been an increase in the number of employers predicting growth. 62% of employers forecast an increase to business activity levels in 2016, pre the EU referendum. 57% immediately following the referendum, 59% last year, but this has moved up to 61% this year. And consistent with the last year, only 5% expect a decrease in activity. This is really good news and shows that employers are optimistic about business activity in spite of continued political and economic uncertainty surrounding the outcome of the current negotiations. I'm not going to say the B word. This optimism suggests organisations remain focused on the opportunities ahead, regardless of the wider market uncertainty. The even better news is that organisations in the east of England are even more optimistic than the UK average, with only 4% expecting activity to decrease. This optimism is also translated into increased hiring plans, with employers continuing to invest in their recruitment and talent management strategies. Recruitment clearly remains a priority for employers, with 76% saying they plan to hire in the next 12 months. In fact, this is the highest percentage we've recorded in the 5 years of this report. And this is mirrored in the East, which is really positive and a clear indication of the East's strength, particularly in digital technology, life sciences, agribusiness, and insurance. Of those looking to hire, 62% state they plan to hire permanent staff, while 35% plan to hire temporary, contract and interim staff, 6% more than last year. Despite this positive business activity and hiring outlook, employers are facing huge recruitment challenges. Employers are in agreement that talent management is at its most competitive for some time. 92% of employers say they experienced skills shortages in the last year, with 78% of employers experiencing difficulty hiring permanent staff and 63% reporting challenges hiring temporary or contract staff. Skills shortages are apparent across many functional areas. Last year, it was leadership and management, but it's been knocked off the top spot by operations and technical skills, which are being the most needed by organisations this year at 44%, which is an increase of 14% from last year. Employers also expressed increased concern about competition from other employers. 48 this year, an increase from 45% last year. And applicants with unrealistic salary requirements are also a real challenge, 49% compared to 44% last year. And these hiring challenges look set to continue, as 68% of employers expect to experience a shortage of suitable applicants when recruiting over the next 12 months. The importance of effective recruitment and retention plans is really apparent, as 28% of employers do not believe they have the talent needed to achieve business objectives, an increase from 24% last year. The consequence of these ongoing skill shortages is being felt in employee morale and workplace productivity. Almost half of employers, 46%, reported that skill shortages have had a negative impact on employee morale. This is an increase of 5% from last year. Even more employers, 49%, say skill shortages have had a negative impact on productivity in their organisation. 41% also reported a negative impact on their ability to deliver projects, and 28% say skill shortages are so adversely affecting their organisation's ability that they're not being able to provide effective customer service. The result of this competitive environment, an urgent need to address the skills gap, there's a continued pressure on employers to boost salaries. In the past year, employers increased salaries at a greater rate than they predicted. 73% increased salaries in the last 12 months, higher than the 67% who expected when we asked them last year. The overall average increase in salaries from the UK is 1.9%. But in areas of increased skill shortages, pay rises have been higher, with the North West topping that league with increases at 2.2%. As you can see, the East are in line with the UK average of 1.9%, and this is broadly mirrored across the whole of the East and the South East of England. Pay rises are also larger than anticipated, as 30% of employers increased salaries by over 2.5% compared to the just 19% who planned to. In areas of skill shortages, pay rises have been even higher than the 1.9% UK overall. Both legal and construction and property have seen an average salary increase of 2.7%. And HR has seen an increase of 2.1%. The result of these salary increases has been a higher level of salary satisfaction among employees. 61% of employees say they are happy with their salaries, compared to 43% last year. There's also been a drop in the number of requests for a pay rise. Only 26% of employees asked for a pay rise in the last 12 months, compared to 31% the year before. Despite higher pay rises than expected and greater salary satisfaction, salary does remain the biggest motivator for employees to change jobs. Employees' intentions to change jobs remains consistent with last year, as over half, 56%, say they expect to move within the next 12 months. Looking back at these 12 months, 42% of professionals say they've moved in the last year, and an additional 40% have considered moving. So 82% of employees have either moved or have considered a move. What this does show, if you want to put on a positive spin, is that there's an openness from candidates and that there's a potential talent pool of both active and passive people who are looking at potential job opportunities. And if employers can harness this, it will really support their current talent challenges. Of the 42% of professionals who say they moved in the last year, the most common reason given was because their salary was too low. Among those who do not currently intend to move roles this year, 44% admit a better salary and benefits package would tempt them to change jobs. Pension provision above the legal minimum was the second most popular benefit after annual leave, as employees are aware of the financial benefits of planning for their future. While the importance of effective talent attraction is apparent, so too are retention strategies. Existing employees have demands. For example, employee movement due to salaries may be fueled by a mismatch in understanding and expectations around pay. While 79% of employees say it's important that their organisation is transparent about how pay levels and pay rises are set, only 36% feel this is currently the case with their current employer. Another key driver of employee movement this year is likely to be around career prospects. 53% of employees feel uncertain or negative about their career prospects in their current organisation, a 5% increase year on year. In fact, after salary, career progression is one of the main reasons employees are planning to move jobs. Employers continue to underestimate the appeal of offering a positive work-life balance to prospective employees and the value that this can have as a tactic for competing for talent. Only 18% of employers think work-life balance is important to attract staff, while 30% of professionals prioritise this when considering a new role. The number of employees rating their work-life balance as very poor to average has remained fairly static at 45%, which is a 1% increase from last year, indicating clear potential for employers to appeal to those seeking a more positive balance. The main request to improve work-life balance for 39% of professionals was a change in working hours, including adopting flexible working. While employers may be concerned about the impact of changing working hours, when already struggling with staff shortages, offering and promoting these options is a valuable aid to attraction and retention. Benefits that aid work-life balance, such as generous holiday entitlements, also are attractive to potential employees. The East of England is on par with the UK average, with employers still needing to make significant improvements to their employees' well-being and thus assisting in their own attraction and retention of talent. So, in what's been a whistle-stop tour of some of our key findings, I'll just take a few moments now to summarise. First, we've seen that despite the wider uncertainty caused by the ongoing Brexit negotiations, employer confidence in activity for the year ahead remains positive. As a result, recruitment remains a top priority for most organisations, reaching the highest level since our survey began 5 years ago. However, continued skills shortages exacerbated by increased competition from other employers look set to be the key challenges in the year ahead. These challenges may impact negatively on employee morale and productivity. Salaries are on the rise, but employees are still tempted to move role for a higher salary and benefits package. It's clear that there is a significant active and passive candidate pool which employers can engage with, but they need to offer the right salary and benefits package as well as a positive work-life balance and clear career prospects. Standing out is essential in today's market. While employers may once have looked to the same handful of companies for their competition for staff, employees today are juggling multiple options. Whether it's freelance work or self-employment, promising startups in emerging sectors, or global opportunities. Employers need to be on the front foot and lead with a strong offer of salary and career potential and a seamless applicant experience if they want to attract the best candidates in today's market. Last year, 42% of candidates moved roles and another 40% considered it, showing a real openness from candidates to move roles for the right offer. Being clear about what makes you stand out as an employer, from salary and benefits to flexible work options to your employer brand, will help you appeal to candidates waiting for the perfect opportunity to move. And these candidates are very likely spoiled for choice in today's market. As 92% of employers have experienced skill shortages, and 68% say their top recruitment challenge is a shortage of suitable applicants, employers will need to be more creative to tackle these difficulties. Under a fifth of employers experiencing skill shortages have responded by increasing training budgets. There's actually been a slight decrease from last year, which suggests that employers can do a lot to address their immediate skills gap with greater investment in training and development. Hiring for potential rather than just experience and investing in internal development programs would not only address the skills gaps, but it would help mitigate the negative impact on employee morale associated with staff shortages, which 46% of employers say they're experiencing. As skill shortages intensify, looking for talent in the same places every time is no longer a reliable strategy. Employers can widen their talent pool by looking at different sources that pertain to diverse populations of talent, in addition to assessing their full applicant journey for inclusiveness. Online application processes that reinforce internal biases can result in loss of good quality candidates. From ensuring recruitment materials portray an organisation's commitment to diversity and inclusion, to implementing recruitment campaigns that attract talent from traditionally underrepresented groups, to be competitive in today's marketplace, employers must review their attraction strategies through the diversity and inclusion lens. Thank you. So I will now open up the floor to any questions that you may have for either myself or Jordan. Okay, so Jordan, there's a question here for you. I don't know if you can see that in terms of CBI. The question is, how do I get hold of the CBI Rationalised Housing Report? Jordan, did you hear that? Okay, we'll come back on that question, so we'll let Jordan come back on that question. One question I have got here is what can we do if we can't increase salaries, and how can we attract candidates if we haven't got the option to increase our salaries? I think this is a question that a lot of people ask me, so you're very much not alone. And our survey has showed that, you know, that they are facing a challenge because a lot of potential employees do have unrealistic salary expectations. Our advice is to look closely at your overall offering to candidates, not just the financial elements. So what projects can you offer? What career progression can they see? So you're really promoting those long-term career opportunities. Work-life balance is really important, and it's really how you can differentiate yourself towards the other employers. So if you have flexible working practices in place, make sure you're promoting them. If you're looking at your diversity and inclusion, make sure you're promoting that. So there's lots of things that you can look at that would attract the right candidate for you. Okay, Okay, I have an answer from George, and apologies, I've got a little bit of a technical between the two of us. So with regards to the housing report, it will be by the end of Q1. So the report will be, all being well and the resources running up to Brexit, by the end of Q1. So the previous report, No Place Like Home, is listed on the CBI website. So you can basically jump onto the website and get the previous reports, and once this new report is concluded, that will also be there. Okay, I've got another question in terms of salaries. Obviously, it's a very key thing for people in terms of, the question is, do we expect salaries to continue to rise next year? Despite the ongoing challenges in the market, especially towards Brexit, we are being told by employers that they do feel that salaries will continue to rise. Skill shortages continue to be prevalent, and it's perhaps inevitable that salaries will continue to rise for the most, particularly in those demand roles around legal and construction and property. However, as I keep saying, salary is not the most important factor for potential candidates, and it is about that career progress and that positive work-life balance. So it's about the whole package that you can offer someone, not just salary.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Jane. Forgive me if you couldn't hear me before. Technological challenges. I think the telling your story is really important. More and more members are coming to us asking how they can differentiate themselves from competition. I think that you look at the last few years, the chief storyteller job has kind of found its way to board level. So this is clearly being taken seriously. And I think a lot of firms, often big international firms who are well known, think that their brand is their kind of pull. But actually, their story isn't just their brand. If you're Adidas, Nike, Puma, your story isn't that you're Adidas, Nike, or Puma. Your story is that you provide people a way in which they can get to and from the shops more comfortably, a way in which they can run around their block more comfortably, and they get bought into something bigger. That's how firms win consumers. That's how firms can also win employees.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had another question that's come through in terms of how do we engage the senior management in adoption of training and budget. And I think it just does echo to a certain extent what Jordan just saying about telling the story and using the reports that there's lots and lots of information out there, both from Hays and the CBI, with regards to the talent shortages and the need to constantly train and develop your staff. So I know that we'd be more happy to send you any reports, and I'm sure that Jordan was the same, that you need to go and really tell that story to senior management, and it's so critical that they get on board, particularly as we move forward. I mean, the AI will be taking over, and creating different opportunities, and it's about engaging your employees and looking at, yes, we need to train and develop them, but how can we retrain them to add value in the future as well? So I think training is absolutely critical to every organisation, and I think it's about going to your senior management with the right information, the right stories, and also some really good examples from other businesses that have taken that approach to say, actually, we're going to recruit on potential and we're going to train. And that is also really, really going to help your employee morale and your productivity, the long-term tenure of your staff, and everything will just flow through from there.
Yeah, I'd agree entirely. And I think some of the questions around AI and the future of the workforce are very interesting. And these are challenging questions at times to have. But if we really bring it back to what human beings are good at that machines perhaps are not good at, you're talking about things like relationship management and creative thinking and nuances in human behavior, and these things that machines won't pick up straight away. And these are skills that are prevalent in still a lot of businesses today, even digital businesses. People still buy from people by and large in many industries. So I think it's about going back to what we know human beings are good at and kind of playing on those when it comes to training budgets. And the senior question is a good one. A lot of members come to us with very similar challenges. I think the kind of D&I agenda at board level is moving forward fast. There is still work to be done, but the message should be, do you want this to be a business that's reflective of the consumers that it's providing for? And that's the kind of buy-in that you need at senior level. And keep banging that drum. You know, this board, these non-exec directors, this wider management team needs to be as reflective as the body of staff beneath it. And the body of staff beneath it need to be engaged, involved in decision making, and that's what's going to help them drive good results for consumers at the end of the day.
Absolutely. We've also had a question in terms of how do you attract people into fixed-term contracts when there's a competition for talent out there. I think it really does play on that work-life balance. There are still many people who don't want a permanent career. They want to have that flexibility. It suits their lifestyle. It suits their family situation. So it's about understanding how you can engage with that potential employee, and making your proposition attractive. So rather than advertising, we have a role starting in January and concluding in September, how can you appeal to them in terms of, are you looking for a fantastic project that you could advance your skills? Are you looking for a project that will give you flexibility to travel for 3 months of the year? So it's highlighting all the benefits that this individual will get from securing a fixed-term contract. So I think it's really about appealing to what are the motivators for someone to take a role on that is a fixed-term contract versus a permanent role. But there are absolutely a lot of people out there who prefer that way to work.
I'd agree entirely.
We've also had a question of how to improve your brand. I think it's quite complex. And I think it has to be something that is throughout the organisation, and that everything that you do in every place that you advertise yourself, are you sending out the right messages through your social media platforms, on Facebook, on Twitter, not just on LinkedIn and Glassdoor? Are you aligning yourselves to organisations that are going to help you attract the right talent? Are you supporting any community groups? What are your employees saying about you? And that's really got to be seen throughout every aspect of an employee's journey, from that attraction through to onboarding, through to their training, through to their career development and onwards. So you've really got to make sure that that brand is absolutely present in everything that you do.
Yeah, I'd agree. And another important part of this is brand reputation. Reputation is incredibly important. And the CBI's latest kind of trust tracker, which is something that we have that comes out bi-monthly, nearly all of the respondents to our last trust tracker told us that they would like firms to be more outspoken on issues that they consider to be important. Now, I know business speaking out on issues is very difficult, but if you think about the kind of respect that you gain from showing that you have a position on certain things because you think it's the right thing to do, these are things that live with people for a long time, perhaps long before they would ever apply to your company, but it builds a kind of reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're getting quite a few more questions coming through, so what we'll do is we will answer them directly to those individuals coming through. So I'm very conscious of time. One final one that we've just had through is how can SMEs compete? I think SMEs are we've got an awful lot of startups, particularly across the east of England, and they're actually really exciting, innovative businesses. And I think that you have a fantastic opportunity to attract people because of that whole journey that you're going on. It's often an exciting time to join. So I think it's about looking at your whole proposition, not just your pay, and that you've got that real community feel and that you're all working together on something. And I've met some really exciting small startups, small SMEs who are doing some fantastic things, and their employees are absolutely on board with that. And I think, again, it's about the correct promotion of what you're doing. Yeah,
I would agree, and it's quite often, and this may not always be a popular view, but quite often the longevity of careers and the kind of portfolio career approach that people are taking these days might help with selling some of this story. You know, you take someone on at an early stage and you help them develop skills and you expose them to the kind of quick decision making and the complexity of working in a small or medium-sized business. And those are skills that are of real value to them in their further career. If they go and join a bigger organization, they might then come back later on at a more senior level. And I think it's about maybe not pigeonholing firms who can't necessarily offer huge salaries, who sit in the SME space, billing it as a kind of a fantastic experience to add to your overall career, which is probably going to be quite varied going forward. That's I find that quite an interesting position to take, and a position that a lot of members say works for them, working with much larger employers in their region who may then benefit from those staff who join and who leave and then rejoin perhaps later on.
Yeah. And there's a final question there, Jordan. It seems a bit like an economic question, so I may pass that one to you.
So economic forecasts not putting their head above the parapet when it comes to forecasting CPI and RPI. Forecasts hovering around 2.5% and 3.5% respectively for CPI and RPI. I feel that we're in for a major shock to the economy. What's your view? Well, as someone who isn't a full-time economist, I'll be honest. I'm not going to put myself on the line and answer that. What I will say is that from what I do know from speaking to our economics team, is the economy they feel is relatively robust at its current level, but the kind of action taken by the Bank of England around the base rate and interest rate rises, which we might see towards the end of next year, which are currently under review, show that there isn't a great deal of flexibility for a shock. So if we do get to a shock, there's no real room for the big powers the Bank of England have historically had around cutting rates. So I can't comment on CPI and RPI because I'm no expert. However, I can definitely find you an answer. But I would say that the powers we've historically had at central bank level to kind of mitigate shocks doesn't really exist anymore because the rates have been so low for a long time. So it's definitely a risk, but it's a risk that we're working with the Bank of England on, and they are very aware of it.
I think just from a local perspective, I mean, I've been at quite a lot of meetings recently, and I'd say that all the organisations I've spoken to, they're predicting flat in terms of business as usual, or they're being actually positive and quite optimistic. So I do think that we've got to really hold on to that, as Jordan quoted earlier, that brand Britain and Britain's resilience to actually come back and come back stronger.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think one last thought, not for it to all be doom and gloom. Given that we're 10 years on from the crash and that we saw a big resurgence in some industries after some of them were decimated after the crash and that have slowed because of Brexit, I think undoubtedly there is probably quite a lot of pent-up investment in different parts of the economy, and it needs that kind of stability that we're after for some of that to start feeding through. Now, that's not to say that some sectors won't be slightly harder hit perhaps next year as the lag in this lack of investment feeds through, but I don't think we're in a situation where there isn't pockets of investment ready to be done. So I think that's a positive story to hold on to.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'd like to personally thank Jordan. I've found today's session really useful in terms of the UK economy, employment, and how recruitment is faring. I hope you found that really interesting as well. So I'd like to extend my thanks to Jordan from CBI for providing an excellent presentation and for helping me on some of those tricky questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Jane.
You're welcome. And if you'd like to request a copy of our guide, or if you'd like to have a copy of these slides, please speak to your usual contact in Hayes, or you can complete a form on our webpage, and we'll be delighted to look into more detail in how we can help your organisation over the next coming year. And if there are any other questions that you have for us, please do send them through, and we will come back and answer them for you. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a pleasant afternoon, and thank you once again, Jordan.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you very much for allowing me to dial in.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.